Good evening. I'm now calling the Lawrence Alliance for Education Board Meeting for Wednesday, June 8th, 2022. I ask that you please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Great, thank you. We are going to start with public comment. In 1 second, I have 4 speakers signed up for public comment. I do want to just say just a few words just to begin today's session. So there are a few things. I think one, at around 4:42, I think it was this afternoon, I received from Council President Mark LaPlante's office a resolution that the City Council voted on last night, which was a vote of no confidence in the superintendent. And we will be discussing that. So we just received that as the board a short while ago. I just wanted to say very publicly that the fact that we all need to work together for our kids, that includes the board, superintendent, city council, mayor, stakeholders, families, teachers, all staff, is paramount. And so receiving that resolution is troubling. I take it very seriously. I know this board takes it very seriously. We need to figure out how we work together, not if, because we need to work together. And just want the city council, the public, to hear that we received that a short while ago. We take it very seriously. We are committed to making sure that we, the grown-ups, are working together to support the kids, which is really what the main focus has to be. And we have to address this. And so I look forward to having that conversation with the superintendent, with the board, quite frankly with the city council, to sort of make sure that we're on the same page in terms of how we want to engage with one another, because we have to. It's not a matter of like if or how, but we have to. And so I really look forward to continuing that dialogue, just to ensure that we're communicating effectively for our kids. So thank you for letting me say that. The other things I just wanted to point out on the agenda, we are going to go into executive session at the end, and we will be adjourning from executive session. I just have to say that publicly for the record. We'll be discussing 2 items. One is collective bargaining agreement, and the second is an issue as it relates to personnel, which I'll read the full description later, but it really is a chance to basically talk about what is an allowable reason for executive session, which is a complaint against an employee. So we're going to go into executive session for that. However, I want to come back to the first reason for executive session, which is to discuss collective bargaining, which I am really excited that we've reached tentative agreement with 2 of our unions. One is the custodian, and one is our LTU, which we are thrilled. We value all of our employees, and I'll talk about these 2 groups just because those are the 2 contracts we're going to be looking at tonight. But I can't say enough, obviously, about our custodians, the work that they have done, continue to do, and so we're really excited to be able to reach tentative agreement. And with the LTU, our staff, our teachers are everything, and so we're just really, really happy to be able to not only reach agreement, but reach a deal that we hope signals the value in terms of the monetary way that we want to recognize our teachers. We are also very heartened that such a large proportion, I believe around 75% of the LTU membership participated, and that it passed with what I believe is an 82% favorable vote, which is kind of unheard of. So I'm really, really pleased for that. Again, most importantly, because our teachers and all of our staff, but again, I'm talking about the teachers, as LTU we're talking about right now, like just it's broken my heart, and I know board members over the last year and change as we're hearing from folks and just not feeling the value that we all know and really carry for you all. So to be able to at least reach an agreement on what we hope and feel is a good deal to compensate our teachers, we're excited about. We remain really hopeful to continue with all of our bargaining units. And so really continue, and really just am committed to continuing to engage in good faith bargaining with our units. I'll leave it at that, because I think, again, there's several units that we want to make sure we're being competitive. And again, I don't think I've stated this publicly, but part of the approach here is that we have many bargaining units that we've been in consultation with, and our goal here is to make sure that we are recognizing and our employees, and also that we're competitive. Like, we have to be competitive when we think about other districts that our staff might be considering. And so for us to be competitive and to assume an equity lens to this whole process means that for some groups to become more, to become competitive in relation to other districts, like, it's going to take different levels of adjustment, just because some are sort of further from, sort of the high average, which is, sort of one way to think about it. So I say that just because, we've reached this tentative agreement with 2 of our bargaining units. We really want to keep working with all of our bargaining units, again, in a good faith effort, and we look forward to continuing those conversations. So thank you. Just want to start the meeting, though, on what I think is a huge positive note, which is our tentative agreements with custodians and with the LTU. So, all right, we are now going to begin public comment, and Sunny Ski is our first speaker.
Hi, how are you doing tonight? I have a couple comments from a few different teachers. And I didn't know if I was allowed to ask a quick question, just to I was curious, is anyone here in this whole room attended the VOC graduation last Thursday, or they were at the high school graduation last Friday? I was just curious if people went. All right, cool. Just making sure, because it leads me into a teacher wrote to me about, Colby Callery, he has stated many times that he has invited you all into his classroom, and the only person he has seen in the classroom is Superintendent Paris. She's the only one to come in the building to see the environment that he works in, and he finds it hard to believe that the LAE is making decisions when they haven't seen the actual learning environments in action. So his concern is that your decisions are a big deal. They affect careers and livelihood, but it doesn't directly affect you on the LAE board. So he just wanted that noted. Emily Fury, Ms. Fury, would like a prompt decision on the new teacher contract. And myself, speaking for myself, I would also like a swift ratification of this contract. We've been working for a while without one. But most importantly, I would just love to never have to attend one of these meetings again, because we work our way out of receivership. I know you said we have to work together, and I feel like I've been here 10 years, and I feel like we have lots of groups working together, and I've seen no real headway in either direction. I originally came in because of the receivership takeover. I was one of the lucky teachers who got in because of it. Being a gym teacher is really, really hard to get in. You have to wait till someone retires or perishes to get in. They stay for life. And I got lucky, I got in, and I was so excited at the original dream of how it went. In those first few years, it seemed like it was excellent, and I've not seen that same substantial awesomeness in the last 5 years or so. So I feel like it's really no longer working, and we need to really consider how we can work together to get out of it, because it is not fair to our students. It is not fair to the teachers. It is not fair to anyone working in the district. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Mali?
Humayun Mali, 53 Chester Street. Good evening, honorable members. In this important election year, we the citizens stand up for Lawrence Public School cafeteria workers. We demand the best compensation and contract for them. Lawrence Public School, with the impeccable leadership by Honorable Superintendent Cynthia Paris, one of the best superintendents in the history of Lawrence, moving forward. From her first day of the arrival, with the best leadership, from the Columbia gas crisis to the worst pandemic, she has stand up with our families and children. The triumphant success of her fundamental policy of 100 days just listening to our family, children, and citizens has become a permanent policy. With the excellent and positive school culture, parental and community involvement has improved. Building the new school makes every Laurentian proud. but our job as a citizen is not over. We must support our teachers and the best contract for our teachers and their great union. We demand of Lawrence Public School leadership with a budget of $230 million. Please do not ignore our cafeteria workers. They work so hard. They deserve the best compensation. We cannot bust their union. We support your union. We support the Lawrence cafeteria public workers. In this great city, we respect the union right and we respect your hard work. In this important election year, we demand the best contract for our teachers. Lawrence, as a great leader, Nelson Mandela said, education is the most powerful weapon to change the world. This change only possible if we have the best contract for our teachers. We stand up with the Lawrence cafeteria workers on a strike. We are united to ask them best compensation. Thank you.
Thank you. Kim Berry?
Good evening, Chair, Superintendent Paris, and board members. For the record, my name is Kimberly Barry, and I am the proud president of the Lawrence Teachers Union. I'm happy to stand here today to inform you that our members were successful in working with Superintendent Paris and her team, and as a result, overwhelmingly ratified our contract with the district. After 2 years with an expired contract, our union is thrilled to secure this agreement. More than 70% of the members of the Lawrence Teachers Union voted last night to ratify this new contract with the district after 2 years of working with this expired contract. Of that number, more than 82% voted to accept the terms. The agreement guarantees benefits for the past 2 school years and 3 years going forward. I cannot say enough about how far we've come in our efforts to obtain a decent wage package for our membership. I really want to thank you. These are very difficult financial times. We are happy to be able to honor the process of being inclusive and listening to all our stakeholders in order to deliver this long-term contract. We appreciate it. We think it's good for students and good for teachers. And we appreciate your consideration in supporting this agreement. Thank you.
Thank you. And our last speaker, Sandra Longo.
Hey, thank you. Sandra Longo, Recording Secretary of the Union, long time Lawrence High School teacher. I want to echo what President Barry said. This contract, it feels good. We know it's a step. We know it's a step in the right direction. We understand that there's more to be done for us to reach the other districts as you're talking about and become competitive. Quite glad you mentioned that, Dr. Rodriguez. To tell our students that their teachers matter and that the people around them care about them, I think is incredibly important. So as much as this gives that signal to our staff, I think it's amazing. And thank you also for the commitment to continuing to support our other unions, because I think all together, that's exactly what we need to tell our students, how much we care about them. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will just say it again, just echo, feels good to have some of y'all here, and it's like such a positive moment. I just want to pause for a second and like acknowledge that, because we've all been through a lot, everyone, in the last few years, and I really appreciate the work that our custodians, our teachers, and just a shout out as well for the district team, superintendent and her whole team that have been working really hard on these two and additional contracts as well. And I think, you know, a few things that stand out from these interactions, these consultations, is just the willingness and openness to continue engaging and coming to the table. And if we don't agree, that we keep coming back and talking. And I think that's what really allowed for these two agreements. And I just want to reiterate how important that is and how we eagerly await, to continue that sort of dialogue with our other unions as well. So thank you. All right, we are now moving to our agenda. We have a packed agenda, but it's an important agenda. If we're going to miss the Celtics game for something, it's going to be because of the topics we're discussing tonight. The first one is the superintendent's mid-year reflection. As a reminder, we set the superintendent puts forward her goals, and then we begin the evaluation cycle in the late fall. This is mid-year. We'll conclude it then in the early fall. And the form tonight for the reflection is we're going to get some updates on some of the key actions that the district has been implementing with the superintendent's leadership. And so I think because there's so many, and I've talked ahead of time, we're going to sort of try to be concise in the presentations. We've gotten the materials ahead of time. We'll probably pause, though, after every one to see if board members have questions. But Superintendent, I'll turn it over to you at this time.
Great, thank you so much. First, I wanted to recognize the graduation last Friday, and thank you to all of you who attended. It was an incredible night to be a Lancer where 704 students graduated. And as you all know, we had a guest attendant. And I'll just highlight what I've shared with many of you because it's still very, very tender in my heart, which is the moment that Pedro Martinez got on stage, one of the students at the front said, "Can I take a picture with you?" And he quickly invited our student and said, with one condition, give me a hug. At that moment when the student ran up to the stage, of course I'm next to them, so he audibly said to him, "Tú eres mi ídolo, tú eres mi ídolo, you're my idol, you're my idol. I'm a pitcher too," he said. It was such a sweet moment and a reminder that our students not only are watching people who influence them and care about them, but when they meet them and they see these moments, there's such a recognition of the influence we have when you don't think they're watching. So I wanted to share that with you and thank you in advance for supporting our event. The last thing I'll say is that we are going to be having a graduation, several graduations and more celebrations this year and highlights. But just tomorrow night, we're going to be having our para-educator graduation. And as you know, that continues to be a pipeline and one of our priorities for making sure that we increase staff members that are from our community and something that you care deeply about. So I invite you to join us for that as well. I'll move on because we have our partner, CPRL, on a Zoom. And so CPRL, as you know, has been with us for the past 2 years, working very hard on the Earned Autonomy framework and keeping us updated and keeping us very honest also about our progress here. Earlier today, we met with them and LTU members, so thank you for your attendance. Last week, we met with the principals, and the process is quite robust. So I'm just going to hand it over to my colleagues that are on Zoom, and when you're ready, you can share your screen, let us know. We are on standby for you. I think our audio is not on. I don't know if it's on our end or theirs. And as
Mine.
Okay, gotcha.
Still getting the hang of the Zoom. Thanks so much, everybody, for making the time to hear this sort of midterm report on the status of the Earned Autonomy Framework. As Dr. Paris mentioned, we have been at the Center for Public Research and Leadership at Columbia University, have been working with Lawrence Public Schools for a little more than 2 years now to develop the Earned Autonomy Framework and a menu of autonomies and supports that will be paired with that Earned Autonomy Framework. Thanks everybody also just for keeping up with this work. And so we're going to go ahead and share our screen for now if we can. Purvija is going to share hers. Great. Before we jump into the actual business of the night, though, I do want to say that we had the great pleasure, Purvija and I, of being in Lawrence Thursday and Friday of last week and being in 12 of your schools. And it was exciting. We learned a lot, but we did miss seeing Pedro Martinez. And so once I learned that, I was highly disappointed, as was my husband, who is a longtime Red Sox, Celtics, and Patriots fan, being a Boston boy. Anyway, on to the business at hand. Tonight, we're going to give you a very quick overview of the Earned Autonomy Framework, really kind of a refresher for most of you. We're going to discuss our progress and the status, and then we're going to give you an overview of our stakeholder engagement, which has really been kind of the highlight of our work over the last few months. And then we're going to share the current state of the revisions to the Earned Autonomy Framework that we've made based on the stakeholder feedback and ongoing research. And then we're going to let you know about our next steps. Just a quick overview of sort of what the Earned Autonomy Framework is, and let you know a little bit about like why it was developed. It was the brainchild of several members of the LAE, et cetera. In like January 2020, CPRO came on board to help develop it. And what it is it's really kind of a locally responsive performance management tool. And the idea behind this is to create something that can reflect the nuances of how your schools are doing, and also look at whether those sort of what we call them like process indicators or ways that we try to measure how a school is doing also end up reflecting student outcomes. So we look both at issues like student culture and things like that, and then try to see what the student outcomes are on the sort of more traditional or quantitative measures like the MCAS scores and other test scores, graduation rates, and things like that. The goal behind all of this work is school improvement. And the idea then is to help give a robust enough picture of how a school is doing that the district can determine the best ways to support schools, and then also help manage the tradition of school-based autonomy that Lawrence has come to be known for. And so what we've been doing over the last couple of years, the LAE approved the Earned Autonomy Framework in June of 2020. Over the next year, we presented a set of recommendations to the LAE last fall on a menu of autonomies and supports, which reflects like sort of how the schools are managed and what how the Earned Autonomy Framework will be used to assist in that management. And then we proposed an implementation of the Earned Autonomy Framework over several years. This work, as the work of the schools themselves, has been heavily affected by the COVID pandemic. And we felt very strongly, and I think many of our stakeholders did too, that rushing a performance management framework into implementation after everything the schools have been through would not be the right move. And the LAE agreed with us last fall. And so over the last several months then, we have been refining the Earned Autonomy Framework with a real focus on making sure that it aligns with the other things of import going on in the district, particularly the goals of the turnaround plan and the work of the school quality review process. And during this time, as we've been revising the Earned Autonomy Framework, we have worked very closely with a group of principals on the implementation and pilot team. They have helped us identify ways that indicators should be revised to be more responsive. They've helped us look at the surveys, et cetera, and just overall sort of tested the work of the Earned Autonomy Framework. And so some of our key players here have been 2 principals from the early childhood schools, 4 principals from elementary schools, 2 middle school principals, Jerry Acosta from the international school, and Melissa Melendez, who currently is the 9th grade principal at the high schools, and then 2 representatives from some of the specialized schools. And we have our erstwhile CPRO team. And then so the work going on right now is we're continuing to kind of streamline the Earned Autonomy Framework. We're still working on making sure that the menu of autonomies and supports reflects what is needed in the district. And we are continuing to work with the IPT principals to make sure that the Earned Autonomy Framework dashboards are accurate, and try to get a better sense of what the implications of this are for how the autonomies and supports will be managed. And we're also we're developing a more detailed plan for the phased implementation. And so as I have mentioned, the core work of the last few months has been our collaboration with stakeholders. we realized that, and so does the leadership team at LPS, that an initiative like this cannot succeed and can't be effective unless we have the buy-in and the understanding of key stakeholders. And so we've met with the Principal Advisory Committee, we've met with several other principal groups, we met with some teacher and staff union representatives to look at our surveys. We've done 3 rounds of pilot testing and had some ongoing collaborative meetings with 12 LPS principals. We meet weekly with LPS leadership, mostly in the person of Melissa Spash. And then we also have continued to have other meetings with principals, teachers, and staff to test our proposed surveys. And so just a highlight for the key revisions to the framework. Some of you, like Dr. Rodriguez, have looked at the framework closely over the years. The core revision of late has really been to, incorporate the school quality review findings in a little more detail. We made that decision in part as we began to realize just what a rich and robust process the earned autonomy, the school quality review process has been for LPS, and how much it has become part of the school's planning processes. It seems that you shouldn't have an important piece of data like that left out of something like the earned autonomy framework or minimized in the earned autonomy framework. So we've gone through several versions of making sure that the indicators that are in the school quality review process are appropriately weighted and considered in the earned autonomy framework. We've also revised the framework so that we have different versions of it depending on the school level. We have an elementary and middle level, we have a high school level, and then we have early childhood. Those 3 levels of schools really have several different indicators that are very specific to their grade bands. And so we've done our best to track that. We've also added some social emotional learning indicators just to make sure that the work of the district and of the schools there, particularly coming out of the pandemic, are represented and captured so we can see how schools are doing there. And we're creating specialized dashboards to reflect your special needs schools, the newcomer schools, and some of your alternative schools. And that's not to say that they won't be measured. In fact, a lot of the indicators will be exactly the same. They're just a few indicators that for those schools can do a better job at reflecting how they're doing. And so what's next in our work? Over the next few weeks and into the summer, we'll try to populate the dashboards, all school dashboards, and that means really the spreadsheets with any data that we already have to continue to test these models that will then help us understand how the data kind of rolls up to give a strong picture of the school. As some of you may know, a number of the indicators do not have data yet because they are based on the student and teacher surveys, which have yet to be administered, but will be administered in the fall to allow us to fully populate the dashboards. We're going to be finalizing the dashboards in order to test different models for kind of quote scoring them either on a scoring basis or a target model or things like that, which will then allow the earned autonomy framework to kind of accurately and comprehensively communicate how schools are doing. And we, as I noted earlier, will continue to work on the menu of autonomies and supports. And so the current thinking on the implementation plan is to begin trying to finalize these indicators and the spreadsheets based on the work we've been doing over this spring and summer. And we want to populate each school's dashboard. And then it's very important that we then work with the school leaders across the district so they can see what their data looks like in the spreadsheets and begin to make inferences about what the data is telling them. And then we want to test the implications of this on the autonomies and supports. And then the real critical process is making sure that the earned autonomy framework and the the measures of performance that it comes up with is aligned with the school planning process. And so we are going to be testing to make sure that because the data comes in at different times, et cetera, that this can all be scheduled in a way that folds efficiently as well as effectively into the school planning process. And then we're going to be testing how that has an impact on the menu of autonomies and supports. And then we can stop sharing our screen. And does anybody have any questions for us?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Questions from board members?
I do have a
Please.
question. At some point you were mentioning that you were working closely with the teachers and the staff and the principal. So in general, and percentage-wise, how many people, how many of the staff, including the teachers, that have an input through the process for each of the schools, more or less?
We have not worked broadly with the teachers, but we have worked with, we have presented to our surveys to, I think it was several kind of representatives from the teachers union who teach in different schools, and some representatives from the staff union to look at our surveys. Some representatives from the teachers union were updated today at the leadership team meeting. They were on that call. And then we've worked closely in this most recent round with 12 principals at different schools. And we have presented several times to the overall principal group and to the principal advisory committee.
So the reason I ask is because if this is something that is going to be implemented school-wide, then I mean, it's important that as many of the teachers are involved in the process, because they're going to be the one on the front line working with the students. So through the process, also making sure that they all have a voice, you know, and some opinion to bring to the table, especially around the measurements, to make sure that what is being measured is something that is reasonable based on the capacity of the school in terms of resources and time.
Yes, that's an excellent point. And a large number of the indicators in the Earned Autonomy Framework actually rely on teacher surveys. So their input would come into the overall wrap up of the how a school is doing. But additional teacher review of this would probably be excellent. If we could, you know, we can work with Melissa and Cynthia to figure out a way to structure getting that in front of some people.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thanks very much for this. And I think it also jogs the memory of like when this process started, like the working groups that were comprised of school-based staff, principals, teachers, other staff, like really helped to identify the areas we'd be looking at, the measures we'd be looking at. So, you know, I think going back now and sharing sort of the latest iterations with that. So, but again, just to reiterate that, I think from the beginning, the design of this was very intentional about including the voice of various stakeholders, school-based stakeholders, which I think has been really important. And to your point, Elizabeth, the fact that the data sources, and first of all, this is like a Lawrence tool. You know what I mean? It's not the state. It's a Lawrence tool that is taking the Earned Autonomy Framework a step further in trying to have more clarity around articulating what are the autonomies for different levels of performance. And again, to reiterate, the framework itself was developed from the beginning with input from school-based staff, which is critical here. And this is not meant to be evaluative and like, you know, but it's meant to be, I think, answering a question that we've heard for years from school-based ILTs and teams is like, we have this autonomy, but like in what areas and what triggers it, what doesn't, and more importantly for the district too, like what support do we need to provide? So appreciate the update. I know we have more to come, so I'm just gonna thank you now and we're gonna move on, but thank you and the team for continuing to work on this.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Thanks, Pourvajah. Great, so that update is tied directly into one of the goals that is specific to vision of instruction. In a moment, I'm also going to give you an update, here, let me make my notes here, of the SQR, which Elizabeth mentioned throughout her update of the earned autonomy. So in your materials, you have the full deck that was given to us by our partner, SCN. And tonight, I'm just going to preview and give you the highlights of that deck. First, I'm just going to share with you just a quick reminder of that process. I think it's important for everyone to know that this process, as Elizabeth had mentioned, is quite robust. And as you all know, we've been doing the school quality reviews for the past 3 years. We started with a handful of schools. Then during our time remote learning, we added additional schools, and all of the schools participated in the remote aspect. And now this year, all of our schools participated once again, and now, of course, in person. So let's go on to the next slide, Dave. Thank you. Reminder that this is a snapshot of the schools, and it's a one-day visit that includes classroom observations. It includes conversations with students, families, and teachers. The document includes rating and 11 indicators, and they describe areas of strengths, focus, and it's quite tailored in terms of the action steps. The rubric and framework is well known now by our school leaders and their teams, and it's very robust, and as I mentioned, includes 11 indicators. And this is new. We are sharing with you what a day looks like when the reviewers come. They start very early and have a full day at the school. The other thing that this doesn't show is the countless hours of prep work that is required in order to design this visit, which means that school teams prepare a lot of classroom visits, and the SCN team will say, I'd like to visit with teachers, I'd like to speak with parents, I'd like to visit with students, and so they accommodate all of those requests, and then it happens in a day's time. All right, let's get to the good stuff here, which is actually some of the highlights of this data. You'll note here that the way this is structured is that the schools 1 through 15, so we'll look at it left to right, the top one. That's the first 15 schools. 30 schools are represented in this data. And when you look to the left-hand side, indicator 1 through 11. So let me try this. The first school that you see says develop, 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 that's yellow. And then you see keep going down, well, develop, proficient, proficient, develop, develop, proficient, proficient. Okay, we're together. So then the next one, and so on and so on and so forth, okay? 1 through 15. So just take a peek there. I'll note some of the obvious aspects of these first 15 schools. The red ones that you see there are direct correlations with schools who had transitions in leadership. So we are well aware of some of those challenges, continue to support those schools and those transitions with school leadership, and have made significant improvement in stabilizing those conditions for those schools. The schools that you see with a mix of yellow and green are schools, again, that were maybe a little stuck, but making good progress. And then some leapfrogged, as you see, solid greens across the board. Those are our schools who have had steady TLTs, steady leadership, really focused, and we're learning quite a bit as to how do they do that, how do they do that. So we're very, very encouraged when we see this. Let's look at some of the focus areas and strengths for those schools. So those 15 that you saw, here is the strength and focus areas. In order to read this, you would have to have the indicators, but again, I'm just giving you highlights and flavors because what I want to give you next in the next few slides is district-wide, but I also wanted to show you the school look. Let's go to the next one. Here's the last 15. This is a total of 30. You should know that when we shared this with the principals, they all wanted to know, well, who's that solid, well-developed, as you might be also guessing. As you all know, I feel strongly that we share the data that is public as a whole in district. That's our responsibility, both as a board and as a superintendent, and that continue to elevate the good practices of our schools and also be respectful when schools are struggling. And this is why the Earned Autonomy Framework is so important in part of this conversation, because it gives us another tool to be able to design supports and resources for those schools who need it the most. The well-developed school, what you need to know about that is that they were working very meticulous and were very, very strategic about some of their resources for the past 3 years. As a result, they landed in an extraordinary place, which is really strong. What we're doing with that school is we're going to use them as an exemplar and going to learn from what they did to get to that point. And all of the principals were not only proud, but very excited to be able to pick the brain of the school leader and those teachers in order to get to that same place. And again, the rates that you see here is directly tied to leadership challenges that we had at that particular school. All right, let's see the focus and strength on that one. Here it is again. You'll note that we have some patterns developing, but I've broken that. That is shown more specific in the next couple of slides. So we'll look at the next one, Dave. Oh, yeah. So here's some positive trends. I'll give you a moment and pause. I'll summarize here, one of the strength areas, and this is true for the past 2 years, is that our school-based team have done an incredible job at creating the conditions, positive learning conditions for our students. That is a point of pride and something that we highlight here, because without good working conditions for our students, then the learning cannot happen. This is especially true after coming back from a pandemic and also being in remote for an extended period of time. So this is necessary, and we're going to continue to build on that. The other indicators here is, sorry, let me look at my notes here. Of evidence of progress is 16 out of the 30 schools had improved index rating, an average of the 11 indicator ratings. And so again, I want to make sure that we see this as snapshots, and we'll be answering any questions in a moment. I know that my colleagues have taken copious notes with the lengthy deck. So we'll see the next one. Yep, keep it coming. Leverage, yep. Yeah, that one, thank you so much. So let's go to the focus areas. Pedagogy across the district remains sort of a mixed bag here. We see some schools that have really strong practices, and then some schools that continue to be challenged by that. So that's something that we're going to be focusing on. The other thing that highlights here, and this is tied to the Earned Autonomy framework, is this area of focus of the curriculum. I think the analysis for me here is that being a district that has autonomy, here's where autonomy and curriculum gets highlighted. Schools get to decide what curriculum they use, and in some cases it's working really well, and in some cases there's still things that we can improve. But that's also directly tied into the Earned Autonomy framework, and when we have that in place, I believe that these types of challenges will be less and less. And as you remember, last year we tied teacher support and supervision as something that we would focus on. And what we see here is that 17 out of the 30 schools have made progress in that area. We're going to continue to work on that. In this summer, in our Instructional Leadership Institute, we will unpack and work with teacher and teacher teams to continue to make progress in these areas. Was that the last one? Yep, there we go. Sure, we'll go back. Go ahead, I'll pause there. Sure, we can take questions.
I'm going to open it up to if there are board member questions at this time.
I'm going to start. So I was looking for, before looking at, oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I'm competing with you. Ooh.
Okay, you're next.
So going back, so I was looking here at, I was actually looking at the, which one was this? Summary. Well, on ours, the slide will be number 13. So that would be summary of SQR Spring 2022, which is, you summarize later on.
Yeah.
When looking at these, so the 3 indicators that seems to be that have the biggest needs are the ones around the instructional core. and then again, the bottom ones, 10 and 11. So in the instructional core, So you see a lot of them are developing. And I know there have been implementation, a lot of professional development and additional support for students, for students through the professional development for teachers. What is the expectation for next academic year? Because I will imagine that these also affect the academic success of the students. And so what is the expectation? What is happening? And if some of that is due to the leadership, how will that then affect the school themselves? Because maybe it's not entirely at the teacher level.
Sure. So I think a few things. One, this is going to help us fine-tune what additional supports both the school leaders need, specific to the couple schools I mentioned, and other school leaders that might be needing the additional support. And secondly, and equally important, is what additional resources and tools do teachers and staff members need?
And are people, so, one of the questions that I had before with the CPRL, it was about how they're engaging with the teachers. So the same thing here. Are they only asking few teachers, or they're systematically talking to the different teachers to get their input in, first of all, like what do they see, what do they foresee as an improvement in terms of resources? Like a teacher can say, well, in order for me to go from A to B, this is the type of resources that I need. And as you look across the board and you ask different instructors, you may see a pattern and then figure out that this is one of the priorities of the group, as opposed to only asking few teachers. Is that something that is in the plan?
Exactly. So this snapshot, as I mentioned, the focus group is a handful of teachers. I think what's important here is that when schools get their individual reports, everyone sees it. All the teachers and staff members get to see it. So first, the principal receives it. Then it goes through the TLT in most process in schools, and then they share it out to the rest of the school so they can process, so they can think about action steps, because every report has very detailed, here areas of focus and action steps, or things that they can consider. So then they can revise the plans that they offer to us in the early spring, and then plan for next year. But that involves the entire school community.
Jess?
Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jess.
Okay, thanks, Pat. This is kind of a comment more than a question, but I would welcome feedback on it. One of the things that that struck me, or that leaped to my mind when I'm seeing that curriculum and pedagogy are areas of focus, I guess what I'd want to say is that I feel like, having, kind of interacted and been a parent in LPS for a long time now, what I wouldn't want to see is us respond to that feedback by just continually investing in fancy new curriculum and whatever the flavor of the month is and so on, because I don't feel like it's so much about the content of curriculum. I feel like it's about the educational vision and the kind of theory of teaching and learning that school leadership is holding forth and then making sure is penetrating, for a lack of a better word, and consistently reinforced at every level, and with new teachers that are coming into the system as well, so that they're getting kind of trained and understanding that. And then if we have that, and that's being done by experienced leadership who understand how kids teach and how kids learn and how kids in our community learn, then it's not even going to matter so much what the individual curriculum is, So that's...
We agree.
Okay.
We agree.
I just want to...
Yeah. And so part of one of the goals is to create that vision. And so some of the materials that I shared with you is this literacy vision, because that, of course, is one of the key steps in order to continue to improve and focus this vision. And in conjunction with what else do folks need? What do the teachers need? What do the principals need? What do the staff need to wrap themselves around that vision to enact the curriculum and the resources necessary? But you're absolutely right. Is why we have a strategic literacy vision in place that will also tie into this. So then folks can know, well, what's the pedagogy to enact that vision?
If I could just say one more thing about it, like, I feel like from some of my conversations with teachers that many, like, especially as they become more experienced, it feels like what they want and need is more creativity and room to adapt curricula and to what they know the needs of their students are, because they're becoming more and more skilled at gauging what that is, right?
That's right.
And so it's not, yeah, I'll stop, but
Yeah.
sounds like we're on the same page.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pat?
Yes, thank you. Superintendent, do these teams visit the schools just once a year?
Once a year.
All right, so they wouldn't come out in the fall like a pre-evaluation?
Like a benchmark? No, they do review other materials and data, but they don't come out once and then again. Is that what you're asking? Like fall and then in the spring?
Okay.
Yep.
Again, like I mentioned last month, my concern is curriculum and instruction. I'm going to go back to the pedagogy and the fact that the teachers don't feel supported, and with the evaluation process. Is there any way you can share with us the timeline for evaluations for the teachers? I strongly believe that a good evaluation will lead to good coaching. And if we're being consistent with the evaluations and the coaching, I think the teachers will feel supported. What concerns me also is the high expectations that vary between classrooms. I'm looking for the exact term. All right, here, enactment of curriculum in many schools, lessons does not emphasize higher order skills. And the variation of instructional practice from class to class. So that needs to be consistent.
Correct.
And how are we going to get there?
Sure. Again, I think it ties into, first, do they have a clear vision? And where do they focus? Secondly, how do we continue to support so that they feel prepared to meet some of those expectations? And who's going to help them? So yes, let's give them a clear vision. Yes, let's support them by giving them the tools and skills necessary, and then the leadership to then be able to enact on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Actually, I do have a follow-up question. So the teachers are evaluated once.
The teachers receive observations that are announced and unannounced, and then coaching that does not, it's not about evaluation, and they receive a formative evaluation and then a summative evaluation.
Does that happen in the fall, so then they can continue to improve as while they're having resources and then have the formal evaluation?
That's right. That's exactly right. So they create goals at the beginning in the fall, then they receive a formative, like a check-in mid-year, sort of like mine, a mid-year check-in, and then at the end it wraps up with like the final evaluation.
And I know this is just one of sort of mid-year, and I appreciate the detail. First of all, I like the SQR because it is, having been a principal in the past, it feels actionable. It gives you some, and I didn't use SQR, but having other type of this feels like it at least gives you some information. Glad to see some progress in some areas, but I think just like other board members are indicating, I think, the fact that pedagogy, curriculum, assessment, instructional core seems to be such an area of improvement, I think, is concerning, just to be blunt. I guess my question, though, is as we get to this point of an instructional vision, like, when and how are schools required to articulate their instructional vision? Like, does that show up in a plan every year, or like, because I think that's part of what I'm wondering in terms of like, how are they, because we do have a district that has a lot of a school-based autonomy, so it's maybe not so much around telling them the vision, but then supporting them in establishing a vision. And I guess I'm starting just from the place of like, when and how are schools articulating their vision that then the district can support them on tweaking, improving, like based on the feedback that we see here?
Yeah, I think this is back to reconciling some of the autonomies and then saying in particular with the vision, instructional, like, I think what we landed is that if we have a district-wide vision, then schools can adopt that and continue to have autonomy on how they implement that. But I really think it's going to start with us. It's why we're going to work on that vision for literacy, is why we're going to work on what are the indicators that will make them continue to have school improvement. And all these initiatives that we've been talking about, the earned autonomy, the literacy vision, and others is part of let's give them a clear vision. But it's going to start with me, it's going to start with us.
Okay, I know this is one of the areas, but again, just to double down, I mean, this feels like it is a priority. I know it's a priority because we're talking about it, but I guess, we're mid-year, or only midway through the evaluation cycle, and I know we named this in the evaluation as an area, of focus, so I'm glad we're talking about it. And I guess what I'm walking away with tonight is that I don't know if we made a lot of progress here. Based on the SQR from the numbers of last year. And, I guess as we continue, and I know this is only mid-year, so we still have time to in terms of the end of year, I'd love to, as you think about identifying the specific next steps I get it, it's the district vision that schools can anchor on, but it also strikes me like schools are gonna need some maybe more hands-on support in, before the start of the next school year in articulating what's a good instructional vision, what does it look like, let's work through, and again, I'm not suggesting just giving it to schools based on our model, but we need to start the school year with clear evidence that every single school has a clear instructional vision for students that we think, and you think as the leader, is based in high expectations, is sort of really then, because then the work then really just begins, because just because the school has the vision, you have to have that in every classroom and train teachers, and how does that work? And so I guess it's just, rooted in the data, it's still an area of focus and we see it, but I think for the start of the school year, I think we would need to see just very clear ways that every single school has an instructional vision that satisfies your vision, the vision of the district team on what needs to be in place to then drive teaching and learning on a daily basis, because we're not there yet, and I think that is pretty core. And I appreciate this data because we can talk about it and see it clearly, and there is some progress. And I know we're skipping over that, so I do want to I appreciate this, but it gets back to the practices and what happens in the schools and classrooms every day. And I think this is pointing that we still have work to do. So. All right, we could probably spend all night talking about this. This is such a rich data set. We have two more. The next one is ESSER update as far as the mid-year.
Great, so we're also going to give you an update on ESSER, and in a moment, I'm going to have Maciel and I think Chris Heath walk us through the latest one. But we've been talking about our funding, our grant funding, for, I think the past 2 years in earnest. And I know that you all have requested very detailed information, and we continue to think through the latest ESSER funding. So go ahead and show us what we got. I'll have Chris Heath jump here.
Good evening, everybody. Hope you all are well, and I'm back again to give us an update on ESSER. Tonight's overview will be that. It will be an overview, high level in terms of ESSER 1, 2, and 3. Again, those are fund codes 113, 115, and 119, provided by DESE. So on your first tab, I broke down the Sr1 allocation. Last time I was here, I reported where we were. I kept that format similar, so it's a familiar document to everybody. But I just wanted to go through and let you know again that we had received $5,909,686,000. This one had a prop share, which I described last time, which was our share that goes to our private schools, where we're obligated to do that under Sr1. And also specific to this one, it has an end date of September 30th, 2022, which is fast approaching. But I'm really proud to report that we are actually above the 95%. We're around 97% allocated or obligated in that area. So we have a goal of September 30th, but I think we're going to really shoot for our goal of August 30th to have this one completed. Important just to quickly note on a high level that these slides do tell a kind of a story as to how we've been spending and what our plans are for spending ESSER throughout the life cycle. And each one you'll see quite different what was kind of folded in as system supports. And it varies. So we have the descriptors of instructional professional salaries and fringe benefits, stipends, contracted services, supplies and materials, and then other costs. So Sr1, the picture that it's painting is that at the very beginning, we needed a lot of supplies and materials. And those are the things that were quite obvious during the height of the pandemic, that what we needed and what our schools and students needed, and families. So I think I tried to seed in there some details as to what the bulk of our spending supported, and many people will see those items because a lot of it was the supplies and materials, the Chromebooks, the hotspots for communications home, iPads, instructional licenses for our new kind of instructional technology. So you can kind of see those items. Next is Sr2. This has an end date of September 2023. This allocated amount was $24 million. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but just to quickly highlight, it does not mandate equitable services. The private schools were awarded a separate federal funding for that this time. There's the core tenets of Sr2 were academic and instructional, social and emotional supports, operational issues to address planning, coordinating, and provisions of services, and mental health services. And they did put a clause in there to have a minimum spend of $10,000 in the areas of mental health services and supports. Obviously, our community felt that of much higher need, and so you'll see in there our spending breakdown, which greatly exceeded that minimum threshold. Again, the familiar format broken down by descriptions. I just wanted to introduce the language. This was, Sr2 was the federal relief of coronavirus response and relief supplemental appropriations. So that was a different allocation than Sr1. This allocation again was $24 million. As of 4/5, we had encumbered and expended 47%. I've gladly seen several large-scale projects come to life since this was last updated. So I'm happy to report that under the contracted services area, which is more around 50% in this particular grant, some of the larger scale items that are of district support have been coming through the pipeline, which I'm really excited to report. The large scale HVAC and air quality pieces are coming in, the engineering and design quality pieces are coming in, some of the really rich professional development for the district and the teachers and the students are coming in. So I'm really happy to report where we are at this point with an ESSER Grant 2, which again has a life run till 2023. Just some other areas, I think some of the high low-hanging fruit areas to discuss is the identified curriculum needs. We did a lot of work around what the students are really showing us that they need. SEL supports, we supported greatly in that area, as well as the technology areas to continue that sustainable plan around we have new technology, we have new programs, how do we continue to benefit from that? So really quickly, I just want to point out some of the staffing pieces up above, which I think are critical and really speaks to the high importance we put on that, and that's the BCBAs and the BBEs, as well as the additional educational supports for our students, and that was impact proven from all of the community members felt that that was the important area to support. ESSER 3, so this will be completed spending by 2024. This has a budget of $54 million. Again, I'm not going to read all of this, but just to really point out that the real tenets of this are to focus on students' academic, social, emotional, mental health needs as it resulted from the impact of COVID-19. So this is a large number. It has a lot to it, but they've asked the direct focus to be on these particular tenets. This had a minimum threshold of 20% for addressing learning loss. I would support the fact that we're well over that again, because that was a need that we realized our students have. So we are well over that threshold. We will be able to meet that minimum requirement without problem at all. And then lastly, I just wanted to talk about how the plan to move forward with what this will look like. This is recently released from DESE, so we've had action in this grant for about 3 months now. And I will come back and report to you again. Looks like probably August. I'll give you another update on where we are in these 3 grants, and I'll hopefully be sharing with you that we've closed ESSER 1. But just again, because it does paint a picture of where we are and what we're doing, you can see that there's some balance from the original ESSER 1 in terms of the percentage allocation against the descriptions. So you'll see that we're doing a lot of good work, and really what's beefed up, you can see a lot in the instructional professional supports, as well as the maintaining contracted services. In there is also embedded very significant district systems improvements, as well as needs set forth through teaching and learning and social emotional learning. And again, the supplies and materials are in there as well. That's for sustainability. Any questions for me?
Great, thank you. Questions? I see Pat, Jess.
Chris, thank you for this report.
Sure.
It would be easier for me to understand if you gave a breakdown of the costs rather than the percentages.
Yeah.
It's very difficult to look at 7% and have to figure, exactly what is 7% of that year's allocation. And maybe list specifically where the money is going and for what purpose. It would give a clearer picture of what the ESSER funds are going to, and a little bit more transparency. On page, I don't have a page number, the ESSER 2 listing, I noticed that contracted services with the school quality review, is that to pay for them to do their review of the schools, or is that the professional development needed to support the schools to reach their goal with the SQR?
So that's a good question. That's under contracted services. That would go to the independent group that's providing the service.
Okay. Somewhere here, is there money allocated for any kind of building improvement? I see the HVAC system.
So that's a really good question, and I'm sorry if I didn't accentuate that enough, but there is significant contributions into city-owned buildings, improvements to those that
All right,
are.
because I was thinking, in light of, the recent news in our country, the high school has a significant number of doors in the building. And what I've seen when I've been there is that little pebbles are put at the door to hold the door open. So you really wouldn't know which doors people from the outside have access to. And I was just thinking if there was any way that some kind of an alarm system could be put on the doors if they're left open, that would send a message to the security desk that door 21 is open. It's just, I was just thinking of safety, and the high school just popped into my head with doors propped open and people having access in and out of that building. And I was wondering if ESSA funds could be used to do something like that.
So we're going to definitely talk about safety moving forward with specifically to your question and concern. We share the same one, the principals and Dave Hernandez and Merlino, we all talked about that after the events, the terrible incident in Texas. So we share your concern. And so let us come back to you all with, our good thinking about this and safety protocols, and then we can, talk about funding sources for that.
Okay. But if possible, I really would like a more specific breakdown as to how the money is being spent.
Yeah, so I did include within the example areas, those were the largest share pieces of what was spent under each description code. But we're definitely taking notes, and I can certainly add some of those. I think it would be really hard to have every single item and its costs, but perhaps like those high need, high yield areas could have an associated cost with it.
All
Would
right.
that be helpful?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Sorry, I just want to clarify, what would be hard to get the cost associated with the items we're spending the grant funds on?
If it would be important for everyone to have like maybe the smallest procurement of,
Like he doesn't
$300,
have the total line.
$300 for this
Yeah.
item
Yeah.
versus $14 million HVAC system, right? So I'm kind of thinking
Got it.
what would be most
Thank you, yeah, just trying
fruitful
to,
for the group to have for
got it,
information.
thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, Jess, go ahead.
This is actually more of not a content question, but how does this money come to us? Does it come in a lump sum to us and we hold it, or does it come on a reimbursement basis? How does it come to us?
That's a really good question. It's all part of what's set forth by Massachusetts procurement laws, and it's run through DESE, so the Department of Ed. So what we do is we do a lot of projections around costs. They give us an initial payment that we then establish in our city ledgers. We work in partnership with the City of Lawrence to establish account lines that our munis system charges against. So there's a
Okay.
checks and balance for every procurement, an obligation and or contracts that need to be written for that. And those have specific account lines attached to them. And then as we're spending, we are projecting out, making requests for funding to be sent to the City of Lawrence based off where we are. They have this is an initial earmarking, if you will,
Right.
and then we slow draw and hold funds and use them as we're spending.
Okay. I mean, because I was just thinking, if we're holding some substantial amount of cash at any given time, like the interest on $54 million, even at a horrible savings account rate.
Yeah, so you're
Not
actually
like-
bringing up something that actually keeps myself and my department awake at night, in which we don't do that. We can't do that. We're not
Okay.
allowed to do that.
We're not
again,
allowed to
We'd be
hold them in-
collecting interest
it-
on money that's really not ours,
Gotcha.
right? So
Too
we're
bad.
very, very cautious of that. And we work in really close partnership with a very mindful group at the Department of Ed. And we work together with them to work through our progressions of spending. So
Got it.
no, there's no big check that was deposited in this amount. So for us anyways. Any other questions? No? Okay, great, thank you.
Sorry, I do have one more. You got out of there quick, huh? Just one more, sorry.
That's all right.
He's like, I'm out. I know. Just want to make sure we understand. So ESSER 2, we've expended or encumbered about 47%, maybe a little more. You're saying some things are coming in. And we see the allocations there. We see ESSER 3, which clearly we've also budgeted some, the spends in these areas. But just help us understand how, we're still spending ESSER 2. That's sort of what we're drawing down first.
Yeah.
And then at what point will we start spending ESSER 3? And part of the reason is I look at that September 30th, 2024 date, and that's only like 27 months away or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And that makes me very nervous that,
Yeah.
you know, so just talk to us about the timeline, how the process works. And
I certainly share that anxiousness with you, and that's kind of how our department functions all the time. But these are considered multi-year grants, so they're designed to be flowing through multiple years. Rarely do we have grants structured like this, where there's a stacked value, which doubled each time, and that we're managing 3 specific large-scale grants at the same time, and then pre-planned how to populate those spending areas ahead of time with accountability measures of our spending in that too. So the tenet is really that they want you to spend the money, old money first, if you will. I'm very confident on ESSER 1. I'm very confident on ESSER 2. As it's planned now, but as we know, things happen, contracts slow down, there's problems with vendors. So we do have to be able to ebb and flow, and we do have things that are hitting against each grant before the other ones are spent, because we had to do targeted spending. So you'll see HVAC doesn't show up on all 3 grants, it shows up on only targeted ones. So those contracts are hitting now. So there are things hitting against ESSER 3 right now. They just haven't been fully encumbered yet, which is why I didn't put them in.
okay, sorry. So just that last point, I want to make sure I understand. So there are some expenses that are hitting on ESSER 3, even though it
Yep.
shows that we haven't spent all of ESSER 2.
Right, correct, and that will
Okay,
absolutely
okay.
happen. It really is multiple balls in the air,
Okay.
juggling the 3 grants, because each one has 1, different tenets and requirements, and 2, different areas of focus that we wanted that particular grant to support.
Yep.
Right?
Great, that's helpful. And in terms of a reporting, just timeline, trying to get a sense of like, I know we're closing the fiscal year. These are obviously multi-year grants,
Yep.
but like, what would you recommend as a cadence of like for the next update where we would be able to see sort of what movement has happened on all the ESSER funds?
Yeah, I think we had talked about me coming back every few months and giving
Yep.
you an update. I'm agreeable to do that, and going back to your point there, Pat, about having everything transparent, it's an open book. I mean, everything has a ledger that's attached to the city. So we can provide that, and I can come and report to you, I would think maybe every other month, or if there's a need, then I can certainly do that too.
Yeah, we'll work on the cadence, and I think it's just where enough time has passed where actually things we'll see.
Correct, yeah.
Like, you know,
I genuinely think that my next report to you, you'll see bigger chunks coming in. Like when I'm saying I've seen this, there's been contracts that have been made and signed, and those will be big scale contracts.
great,
So,
thank you.
yeah.
I think Noemi had one more question or comment.
Yes, I do have a question. These being grants, do they have a budget line that is indirect cost? And if it does, how much it is? And then how we're using those indirect funds?
Yeah, so we are not using indirect funds.
You're not, okay. Thank you.
Yep, it's a direct budget.
Please, Maria.
It's a lot of funding, and after reviewing the SQR, hearing the SQR update and just the room for improvement with regards to curriculum and learning, and knowing that these funds are, a lot of them are targeted or are allowed to be targeted towards learning loss. I mean, I see a correlation of like how to allocate those fundings, those funds, I should say, and we can just kind of go to town in planning some really creative programs to address learning loss. I think that would be my main concern. In addition to building, I think this is one-time funding that we can really spend on making our schools safer and healthy. But just a comment that I would love to see that being a priority, and in direct correlation with the SQR results.
Yeah, I'm glad you said that, Maria, because most of the schools during the planning process requested just that. So for example, they requested not only additional funding for professional development, but they requested additional FTEs for this learning sort of gaps that we're experiencing here, like interventionist, coaches, those kinds of support personnel. And they understand that it's a sort of infusion and intervention for a short period of time to develop skills and capacity, not long-term investments, but back to your comment of like, you know, it's there, we have it, so let's use it.
All right, thank you. And thank you, Chris.
Absolutely, thank you.
And in the final area under this section is a safety update.
Sure, and in your materials, I shared with you the latest update that we share with the Safety Committee. Just to highlight for that is that, as you know, we had been proactive in sharing with you all just updates on safety protocols specific to the high school, given, you know, the incident that was very public back in the fall, and we continue to make different improvements, progress, interventions mostly. You all were incredibly supportive to say yes to many of the FTEs and structures that we put in place. And so we shared that with the Safety Committee. We continue to share it with you all. A highlight is that when we did hire the Restorative Justice Manager, that has been quite impactful. I invite you all to come see what happens in that space and how students are now trying to mediate interpersonal conflicts that were like a big deal back in the fall. And now, for example, we had a little cafeteria, you know, thing, and it was just a thing, right? Like two kids, you know, being kids and high schoolers, and then it gets mediated and everybody moves on. So I also wanted just to bring that part of the update because it's also one of the things in my goals.
And just want to reiterate, so this presentation was shared with the City Council's Safety Committee?
Correct.
Can you just say a little more about that? Like, when was it shared? Who shared it?
Sure.
All that?
Sure. So as you may know, and this is part of my documentation and materials that I shared with you, the Safety Committee has invited us 3 times in this late spring, of which twice, well, 3 times actually, I was meeting with you all, either here or in executive session. And then the last time that they invited me, I was in executive session, which was just last week or the week before, I can't remember. When we were in executive session, was it last week? Yeah, it was last week. And so my colleagues at the high school were able to attend in my stead and share this with them.
Were there comments or questions related? Yeah, please.
Just to reiterate, you shared this with the, thank you. You shared this with the Public Safety Subcommittee?
Sure, my colleagues were in attendance and shared this information with them.
Oh, okay, because in looking at, I couldn't find the date that it was shared.
Yeah, it was the day we were in executive session. Let me look really quickly. I can look in my calendar, but I believe it was just last week. It was just last Wednesday, yeah. Mhm.
Oh, okay, I'm sorry.
Two, you said? 2 weeks ago, thank you so much. It was 2 weeks ago, the 25th, thank you.
I do have a question. So there were 3 meetings.
Yeah.
And there were representatives, you know, from your team, but you were not able to go because you were in executive meetings. Have you guys figured out a way to meet at another time when there's no, you know, an executive committee? Like, have you reached out to them and say, I was not able to go, can we
sure.
actually?
Yep, for sure. Each time the invitation has been offered, I share with them, I've called and emailed, tell me if there's anything specific that you would like to discuss. I'm unable to join, I'm with the board, tell me, you know, what you need. So yes, I have reached out and offered, so yes, that's happened as well.
And
And I've documented that for you all in the materials.
And they have responded to those emails?
No, not quite. They've just invited me to the next meeting.
Thank you.
Mhm.
This does feel like, and I know we're sort of done with this section, but I think as it relates to the topic we were just discussing, and given that one of the goals from the prior evaluation was around working with, I just want to pull up the language so I don't butcher it. Well, it's under the professional culture, but one of the things we developed is just that ongoing working with different stakeholders, including elected officials. I mean, so I'm glad that this information was shared, because I know the safety committee has asked for information. So it sounds like not only the information, but we actually had staff members there to be able to talk to it, which is great. To Noemi's point, I think part of the feedback that I think we've heard most recently is the desire to engage with you directly, and we'll need to talk further about how that happens, but I think just want to reiterate that, it feels like that is something important for the safety committee in particular. And so if outreach has happened around, we have information clearly, but what else and how else, I think that'll be important. But there's just seem to be something pretty important that I'm hearing loud and clear about you being, I think present at that meeting, which now that they have this information, I think we'll need to figure out what additional information would actually be most useful for that group. But just to reiterate, I think that your being there is going to be important. That said, what I said at the top of the meeting is I think it's important to make sure we are also talking to the safety committee or the city council around just expectations around how we want to interact and when and why, because I understand like inviting the superintendent. I think we do need to continue to have open lines of communication. I just feel like there's a disconnect here. I'm not sure, because if there is information going and then we're, I don't know, this is what I want to open us for a little bit here.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like Ventura, it's going to require a certain amount of flexibility on our part, if not on their part, right? Because if the Public Safety Committee meets on Wednesdays, right, and there's a request to the superintendent, and I have no idea with what kind of timing or advance notice those requests are being made, but then, if we deem that important enough, and I do think we believe it's very important to be in communication with City Council, then we're going to have to be willing to reschedule so that the superintendent can be there.
Yeah, I also wonder if there, again, we have tons of information, even today, all these updates that we're getting today, that I wonder if there's anything we can be doing differently, because the superintendent's here, she's sharing all this information, to not be duplicative and figure out how do we actually ensure that we're getting information together, or in ways that, I think meet the spirit of what we need, which is like sharing information. I don't think we're trying not to share it, but just trying to think through like how to do that. Mm-hmm. I think. So know what I mean? Then let's go to Julia and then Jess.
So, to me, one of the things that we feel is that, well, yes, representative can go to certain meetings. It is important that the leader person is there, because it's also a symbolic act of being there. And and I understand that, we need to be also flexible about, maybe we have to rethink about when would be the best time for our meetings, if indeed the subcommittee meetings are always on a Wednesday. But then the other piece with that is, it is also our responsibility to figure out, in the same way that we push the school district to look for different ways to communicate with parents, because maybe strategy A might not work. We have to look at different ways. We need to do the same thing with the other stakeholders, because often it doesn't matter how transparent we think we are, it doesn't matter how well a job can be done, when information doesn't reach out to people, there is a perception of me not being honest. There's a perception of maybe we're hiding something, which is not necessarily true, is that the information is not getting to the people. So what people feel like is that they're not listening to us. So we have to figure out a way, and this is not just for us, it's also for those that are working with us, to meet in the middle, to figure out how we can best communicate with them. And it is more on our effort, because we are the ones that are the school district. We have to ensure that we find a way to reach out to those that they feel that they also want to know about how the school district is doing.
Julio?
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of recommendations based on what Jess also and Noemi said. One of them would be for the superintendent to perhaps send the city council or the public safety committee a few dates when she might have availability for them, because as you know, they also need to publicize these meetings when they have their meetings. So they might be able to accommodate based on her letting them know about this. And the other thing would be to, the same way that we as a board receive emails pertaining to things that are happening in the school, to perhaps share it with the city councilors. Just include them in the emails, because as you said, it's a matter of perception, and if we really want them to feel that they're being included, maybe this is the best way to do it. It's just a recommendation.
All right, I think we're done. Thank you. That's a lot of information you shared with us, and I think you've heard feedback, which is the goal of this. It's just mid-year reflection. So it's reflection, but it means like you can make adjustments, you know, and so forth. So thank you for sharing the information for the whole team, because I think appropriately, as part of your evaluation reflection, it's really the team's work, which really what it should be. It's like you're aligned to the work you're leading. So just want to thank you for that.
Ventura, can I add
please.
something? I just want to say something on behalf of the counselors. I feel that they're feeling pressure, as you know, because we're a receivership board, which means that we don't really communicate with the constituents. So a lot of the stuff that happens in the school system, the constituents of these city councilors are calling them. So they're feeling the pressure. Yeah. And this is probably what's creating the friction between the groups. I just wanted to.
Yeah, and if I could say something, and again, I just want to be like very candid, you know, openly, like this is, and I don't want to speak for you, but this is a pretty unprecedented ecosystem to have to manage under a board that is a receivership board appointed by the commissioner, a school committee that is elected, but you know, by law, only has certain limited roles. A city council who I agree is probably getting constituents coming to them because they're trying to figure out like who to go to and where to go to. So I'm just saying that it's a pretty unique in Massachusetts and maybe the country, like model to be having to operate within. So I just want to say that because this is a very unique setting. So I think just as this is a unique setting, I agree, Julia, and what others have said, it's going to take a lot of communication and sort of a unique solution to this because, you know, in some ways, city councils, their job is not to be sort of in the day-to-day of schools. Like, that's our job. However, in the current context, however it's playing out, I understand the pressure and the questions they're getting and the information that they need. You know, I also see a lot of evidence that a lot does go to them, like emails. I mean, in terms of the report that we've seen, but somehow that's still not enough. You know what I mean? And so, I say that like in the spirit of like, then we got to figure out how to ensure that city councilors and other stakeholders are getting the information they need, while at the same time recognizing that there are roles, you know, for each group and body, and we need to maybe recalibrate or, you know, for the first time, like try to be really clear with these important stakeholders around what the roles are and should be. But I guess I also want to say we're also doing that in the context of like, there's nowhere else in the country that I know that has the exact sort of different bodies and groups that are, you know, so there is no easy playbook or answer to do it, but the bottom line is clearly the dynamics are bubbling up where, you know, this is about the superintendent, but it's also about us and the city council and all, like trying to figure out what is the level of information that all these different stakeholders need to be able to communicate with their constituents, but at the same time in a way that recognizes and respects the different roles, you know, that our groups all play. Pat, go ahead.
I was just thinking, a thought crossed my head, and I don't even know if it's possible. Could we invite maybe one or two counselors to come to our meeting and not necessarily be part of the meeting, but be here to ask questions and bring back information to the city council?
You know, what I would say is, I am open, and we need to make time to actually come up with some ways to further assess and come up with a game plan. I think that it is something that it's not just us on our own to come up with. Like, I would actually love to engage, and I have started engaging with leadership on the city council, because I think precisely that, though, is like coming up with what are the things we're needing to solve for. Like, something's not working, you know what I mean? Like, what do we need to solve for, and how then can we go about doing it? It might be that, Pat. It might be folks coming here. It may be more sort of formal, frequent check-ins, you know, between the school department, this board, and city council, and elected school committee, by the way. Like, I think we need to put all those on the table. So I think it's going to require a little more discussion, that we need to intentionally set time to plan for and engage. So I don't know, that's just my 2 cents, but turning it back over to the...
I'm thinking that even, you know, along those lines, could we have a meeting with all of them at the table to figure out, like, what is the vision? Like, because they are, at the end of the day, like Julio was saying, they are the eyes and the ears of the city. So, you know, it would be also ideal for us to know, as we are, you know, working, you know, doing this work that is unique in the nation, learning from them, what is the aspiration? What do people want and look and question about, just so we can set the tone of an open communication and be open, you know, have an open. And the idea is not about like accusing people A, B, and C, but it's like coming to the table and they will say, you know, our constituents, they are concerned about A, B, and C. They would like to see A, B, and C, and what they aspire to. And then on our side, it's also give us a good measurement between what we've seen here in the school district, that as we guide in some of the strategies and help implement some of that. So then they will feel that also they're being heard. Because I think part of the issue is that they feel like we're making decisions in a vacuum and they're being on the outside.
So, can I say a couple of things? One thing is that even though we are not an elected board, there are many of us who are in regular contact with what I would term the constituents in this case, which are students, parents, and teachers. And many of us are having conversations with those folks, soliciting feedback, discussing things that are going on, or are approached by those folks proactively. So concerns are not just going to the elected city councilors or school committee members. And second of all, I feel like there are many of us on this board who have been saying for years that we need to be meeting with the elected school committee at a minimum and talking with them and figuring out what is the path through this receivership process and out of it eventually. And so, you know, if this is what's bringing it to a head, great, but that conversation does need to happen. And then thirdly, I also think that partly because we are a receivership board and we're not an elected body, it's probably incumbent upon us to be the ones proactively like reaching out to city council and, you know, rather than, I mean, I don't want to minimize what each of us are incredibly busy, and we have many commitments, and there are subcommittees that are part of this board. I think that, you know, city councilors arguably have, their meetings are longer, they have more subcommittees that they're part of, et cetera. So rather than putting the onus on them to come here and listen and report back, I think we might want to be making some kind of regular report or update to them and doing them that courtesy.
Can I add something to what Jess just said? At this time, the discussion about having joint meetings with the elected school committee members has been had at this level. And I think perhaps one of the things, and Ventura, through you, is to have a meeting with the commissioner and have that conversation with him as to how we can start that process, because that process needs to happen. The elected members of the school committee need to participate in this process so that when we're ready to turn over this board over to them, that they're ready and able to do that. And it doesn't matter how much we discuss this issue until the commissioner decides that it's in the best benefit of the city to have that type of communication. And as far as the city councilor, they're the legislative body of this city. They're not going to come to us. We have to go to them, unfortunately, no matter how we see it. They're not going to come to us. So we need to be creative in finding a way of getting them the information that they require.
Fair enough. I'm going to pause the discussion here just because I know we have other things. I will, if it's okay with the group, I will begin some of that outreach through the chair of the city council as a starting point. And I do hear also, there's a communication also with the elected school committee that was going through training, and that was part of what they were going to do right before we revisit it. So I need to revisit that. And I do hear this other larger, I'm going to frame it as larger, but different question, I think, Julio, which is around sort of what is the next phase? What is the next step? Because in some ways, we're here in this moment and we have to do what we can to ensure communication is had and all parties feel like they do have access to the information they need. But I hear you calling a different question, which I also appreciate and think is important. But let me start with your permission, the council president, and then I can report back to the board. Great. All right, we have our friends from reporting on the Oliver. I'm going to turn it back over to the superintendent. Thank you for that discussion, though.
Great, thank you so much. Okay, the Oliver team is here, and in a moment, they're going to be giving us an update and requesting a vote.
Good evening, board members. Thank you for having us here this evening. I'll preface the presentation you will about to see from the members here by introducing the team, which you have already met. We're here with SMMA Alex, Consigli Christy, and Pink Answer Deb Marai. We'll be presenting an update on the project along with a required vote on the 90% construction design submission that is due to the MSBA on the 17th. Equally, after this vote, I'll ask to take a similar vote on the LAE project. That is also moving quite rapidly through the design development as well. So I'll share the vote language for that as well. But I'll hand it over to Alex for a quick update.
Thank you, Adonis. Good evening. Thank you for having us back. David, will you switch the slides for us? Okay, thank you. So tonight we're here just to give a brief overview. Again, my name is Alex Pitkin with SMMA, Architects and Engineers for the project. It's been a few months since we've been with you. You can see that we are rapidly progressing. We're at what we call the 90% completion for our documentation. You've been given that voluminous documentation that's been sent to your funding partner at the Massachusetts School Building Authority. They are reviewing that, as is their purview. So we'll be getting comments back from them, and we expect that to be very, very minimal, very light. As we had mentioned, I think in our last meeting, construction activity has already commenced. You've already been at the site, hopefully, and have seen that activity happening thanks to our build partner at Consigli. Next. Just to remind everybody, the Oliver School takes up every available square foot of that site. And we feel the utmost confidence of the site because, of course, those great open spaces, the O'Neill Playground and the Campagnon Commons on either side of it. and obviously taking care of all those things that you've been talking about, safety, security. We've also been very concerned about making sure that there are outdoor learning opportunities on the site so that students really have access to fresh air, daylight, and such. So you can kind of make out on the diagram that we have 4 distinct learning spaces actually on the site. And you can read some of the other bullet points there talking about safety, security, and some of the enhancements that are going on. Right now, a lot of utility work to upgrade the infrastructure of the building. Just a quick look, again, the nature of the building was to protect the historic nature facing towards Campanion Commons. Later on, you'll see an image of the exterior on the other side. Oops, if you can go back one quick one. And obviously a happy milestone moment was just a couple of weeks ago at the groundbreaking ceremony. Mayor, Superintendent, Adonis, we were able to break ground literally and to hit this important milestone. It was great to see students out there and engaged in this process. And again, your financing partner, the MSBA, was there as they marked these important milestones for the district and for the city. And I'm not going to speak for all of Christie's and her team's efforts on the site, but once again to thank the city for being so supportive. I can't speak highly enough of the professionals at the city. Very complicated utility work and engagement with the site in general, allowing us to capture the ball field on O'Neill Playground was really critical to making a successful project in this instance. So, thank you again for your support. Every month we meet with the school building committee and with Adonis and her team, and we see these reports from the Consigli team, so we really have very much up to date. The picture on the bottom left probably doesn't look like the old classrooms that you remember in the Oliver, but that's one of the school classrooms that's going to be renovated, stripped right down to the bare brick. All hazardous materials have been removed from the building. So we're really ready to really start to engage in the primary aspect of building the school. So where are we today? The 90% is our next budget or estimating check-in. The good news here is we have our estimating team, and then Consigli has their independent estimating team. The MSBA and the process requires that we're within 5% of each other in terms of making sure that all the teams are seeing the exact same data in the documentation. So the good news is we're less than 1%. That's a great chance. We spend multiple days with the team, going line by line through the documents and making sure that everybody has a great understanding of what the outcome for the project is. So you can see the bullet points. You all are filling up your tanks in your car. Christy reminded me that virtually every product in any built environment today has some form of petroleum in it. So we're in a very volatile market. You're knowing that, you're seeing it, and you're feeling it. The last time that we came before you, very much steamrolling ahead on budget. Today, in this hyperinflation market, we're continuing to march forward, and we're keeping an eye on where our numbers are at. We're working very closely with the city and the school district. So, very busy market, tight labor force, and everybody's, of course, heard the terminology of the supply chain and anything that we don't want to impact schedule in any way, shape, and form. We've been given a very clear message from the school building authority that they don't want to impede progress either. So we're really working together to make sure that we're, in real time working through these issues and strategizing. So we are going through a value management process, which you are required to go through at every phase. Just a great check-in like you would do with any budget that you have, right? So we're working very closely with the school in the coming months to make sure that we're doing everything we can to really only build the school that you anticipate and need and want. Working very closely with your facilities group to make sure that the school is absolutely sustainable for moving into the future. So excellent, excellent progress in those conversations as well. And we'll have another bid package on the street, which is steel, which happens to be one of the most volatile of the materials for the project. That's going to be hitting the street very shortly. We're going to be working very closely with the city. That bid is going to come in. and we're going to have to act very quickly because literally they'll be telling us that you have 3 days to sign the contract. So we're doing everything to prognosticate and stay in front of this very active market. Scheduling, very hard for you to see there. We're on schedule. We're keeping track. We're going to be open 2025, and so we're moving right along. And you can study that if you have any questions about the schedule. Happy to stop and answer those. And should I pass that back to Adonis? Thank you.
Thank you, Alex. Any questions before we move to the vote?
Yeah, okay. So I want to make sure I'm understanding this, just because as a fellow developer, albeit on a smaller scale, like we have just seen enormous budget impacts on the projects that we are currently working on. So you're telling me that despite the volatile materials market and the tight labor supply and the supply chain issues, the value management process that you guys have gone through is keeping us within a 1% budget variance?
I'm sorry, Jessica. No, what I said was the two estimates at the time of 90% were within 1% of each other. So they were seeing the exact same information. We do what's called reconciliation.
Yeah.
It's not just one estimator getting that one number. We're getting two numbers. We're working them together to make sure they're as close as possible. We are currently tracking over budget.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we're in an active process to bring that back to budget wherever
Okay,
possible.
how much over budget are we tracking?
So we are about 6% over budget right now.
Okay.
But the team continues to work very hard and diligently to try to reconcile so that we can stay as under as possible. But the project is about 6% over budget.
Right. Oh, that's actually much better than I expected. So, could you just let it, like, what's going to get sacrificed in order for us to stay within budget in terms of the overall vision and, you know, the plans that we've seen so far for this? Like, are we tossing the media lab? Like, what's going to get sacrificed?
We working towards not sacrificing anything. The project we knew was, and the team knew was very challenging to begin with due to the constraints not only of the site, but also of the building. Therefore, we have weekly, monthly, whether it's finance and team meetings where we engage the city so that they are fully aware of what's going on and the possibilities of where we are. Unfortunately, we can't sacrifice much.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad we're not sacrificing much. So, I mean, are we asking the city for more money on this? Like, is the city gonna dedicate some ARPA funds to this? Because this is like a around $100 million project, right? So 6% of $100 million is not a small number. And
Right. We also can't, we're mandated by certain MSBA requirements to have certain things within the build. So that's also where we're constrained in terms of saying, oh, yeah, by the way, we'll just eliminate 3 classrooms from this project to make it happen. It's the materials, it's the steel. So I'm not sure that we can sacrifice anything because it's not a chair, it's not a wall that it's costing the overage. We're actively having those conversations with the city. We have a memo that we're finalizing just to give him exact information and more details in terms of what this the overage means. However, because this is an active work that the team is doing with their estimators, it's still in draft form. So we hope that we can, up until the day that the submission is due, which is due on the 17th, we're hoping that the numbers look a little better so that then we can move forward, not only coming to the city, but to city council.
okay. And then I guess we have a signed contract with Consigli, right? And do they have all of their subs under contract already? No. Okay. Okay. All right. And are we hoping or anticipating that we're going to see any savings on the remaining 70% of those contracts, or is that crazy talk in
I
this
don't think it would be
environment?
responsible to assume that we're going to see savings on those contracts. As Alex mentioned, we're bidding the steel package later this month, and that's going to be very telling, as well as bidding the final trade packages in about 2 months.
Okay. All right. So I get, and I am sorry to pound on this, but so if we have to come up with $6 million more, do we know where we're going to get it?
We're having active conversations with the city.
Okay. All right. That was the point I wanted to get at. Thank you.
And can you just remind us one more time then, because I think we're about to move to the vote, what the vote is that we're taking now and why that is important in sort of the process that you've laid out?
Sure. So the vote is on the 90% construction document. Is the lengthy document that you received that's a draft on top. It's what the team has been working on. It's in draft form because, as we stated, they're still working on reconciling the numbers. So we wanted to present it to you so you saw where we are in the process of the 90%, what eventually will be submitted to the MSBA on the 17th. The only difference with the document that you have in draft with what's going to be submitted on the 17th is that we'll have final numbers. So that that number, whatever the overage number is, it will be reflected on that document. So in essence, you're voting to allow the superintendent of schools, along with the members of the school building committee, to do a final review and approval of this 90% construction design package to be submitted to the MSBA on the 17th.
I just want to say one more thing, which is, like, to be clear, I support this and I'm going to vote for it. And I feel like I would like to say that it will be admirable if you can keep that increase in the 6% range, because most developers in this context are seeing increases of nearly double that in construction budgets because of the issues you mentioned. So I'll be super psyched if it's only 6%.
I just want to point out that we're only voting on the approval of the 90%, regardless of what it is. So yeah. I just want to make sure that we're clear on that.
Yeah. Correct. Just the vote you would take today is just to allow for the team, the superintendent and her team, and the members of the building committee to do a final review and approval, essentially, of the document that the team, the OPM, the design and the construction team will represent to us, so that then we can submit it to the MSBA. The vote is not about the 6% increase or any dollar amount. It's just allowing us to do a final review before presenting or sending over the submission, because we won't have time to come before you again to present a final document.
Thank you. Just wanted some clarity on that, though. So, so at this point, I am happy to entertain a motion to approve, and the motion's there, or sorry, the language that is there. I'm not sure if folks need me to read it, but I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
I
Second.
think Jess got in there or something. Okay. All right. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right. Passes unanimously. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I actually, Chair, if you don't mind, I would like to ask the board to take a similar vote on the LAE project. I don't have that language easily accessible, but I can read it. In essence, there's no presentation to share yet. The team, the LAE team, has been actively working as well with that set of school building committee members to move the project along. A quick update I can share is that the team has held wraparound meetings with the City of Lawrence and the officials, which include inspectional services, DPW, fire, police, and others, just to start the discussions around the building and demolishing the building, the existing building. We have equally have had meetings with school officials, teachers around the design, and kind of like creating the wish list, as we call it, for the new building. At the same time, we have gone out to bid for swing space for the current LAE school students, so that we can prepare for and have the school ready and vacant for when the team is ready to take ownership of the site, so that then we can demolish the building. With that said, we are ready to also, for that project, present to the MSBA on the 30th of June the designed development draft for them to review where we are in that process. And what we're asking you as the board members is to approve and authorize the Lawrence Public Schools Superintendent, members of the school building committee, and members and myself as the Chief Operating Officer and Maciel as the Chief Financial Officer, to also review and approve this submission to the MSBA for submission on the 30th.
So moved.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? All right, passes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Have a good night.
Anis. Sure, next we have Maciel, who's going to share. We talked about this extraordinary waiver, and we just have an amendment here that is in your materials, so it's really just a review of language as well.
So the amendment you have in front of you now just has updated amounts. The updated amounts are due to the fact that since we last met, we actually went out to bid. And so these are actuals. So we will be submitting actuals for approval versus estimates, which is what you originally received.
Great, and maybe just 30 seconds, can you remind us what the extraordinary waiver request is,
So-
why, and all that?
So the reason we asked for the waiver is because we are limited to $150,000 per building per project. So we have in front of you one project that is at $664,466, which is for the generator for the Arlington complex. So as you guys, I'm sure know, that is one of the emergency sites for the city. So having a working generator there would be very crucial, aside from the fact that it's also crucial for our own activities as a school. And then the second bullet is for paving for 3 schools, the Hennessy, the Breen, and the high school.
Great, and just as a reminder, the reason we're needing to request an extraordinary waiver is because we're using, can you just explain that? as well?
Sure.
Yeah.
So whenever you're going to use Chapter 70 funding for your buildings, your projects cannot be over $150,000 per building per project. So these projects in front of you right now are over the $150 per building per project.
Just jog memory. I know we talked about this.
Yeah, it's okay. I'm happy to always
have
refresh.
the amounts here.
Yeah, of course.
All right, any questions? If not, I'd entertain a motion to approve the request.
Second.
All right, any further discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, it passes. Thank you.
Great, and the next, the DCU donation.
So as you all are aware, we have a couple schools that receive DCU donations. The High School Learning Center is one of them. And in front of you is a donation check for $7,500. They would use this funding for support of their online students. They would also use it for support towards student orientation and some teacher appreciation.
All right, do I have a motion to accept the donation? Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Abstentions? All right, passes. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you.
All right. I asked, so the last topic before executive session is adult learning center discussion, and really, there's no action here. We're not voting on anything, but I thought it'd be important to at least open a little bit of space to make sure that if we have questions of the superintendent or the team on sort of what is the status of the funding, because again, I think that the big picture here is we approved a budget that included sort of funding overall for this, but we're, as of yesterday, I think, or as far as I know, the budget that's been presented to the city council does not include the funding for the Adult Learning Center. And the main thing I wanted to sort of open the floor around is, you know, I think the public may wonder, like, why doesn't the school department just pay for it? Obviously, it's a program that is critical. I mean, we talk about wanting to support the development of a local workforce and a pipeline into our schools and others, and we feel like this is a pretty important program. So the main thing is just to clarify and reiterate that question, like, why can't we just pay for it? I guess that's the question I would ask you, Superintendent, if you could explain, like, why can't we just pay for it?
Right, so we are funded primarily by Chapter 70 funding and then the local contribution. And Chapter 70 funding is only for pre-K to 12, and that's really the main reason why we cannot shift funding towards the Adult Learning Center. And so the city gives us the funding necessary to be able to run the programming, and there is a grant that is matched, or the other way around, by the state. So those are the two funding sources that the Adult Learning Center receives. And as you know, we've been managing, supporting, thriving with the program for many years now.
So at the budget hearing at the City Council budget hearing on Monday, I know that this was discussed a lot, and there seemed to be you know, some questions and some interest from at least the members of that committee to continue to explore this and go further. I know that there will be additional hearings because I know the budget wasn't, you know, forwarded. And so this is an active issue. You know, again, no action for us as a board, but this is an important program, I think, for the district, but for the city. I thought that the staff did an excellent job of communicating the program and the benefit on Monday. And this is one where, you know, I would say as individuals, you continue, you know, to advocate. And I guess I would say as well, if there, and I would have said this if the mayor were here as well, is if there were a way to continue just dialoguing around sort of this issue, because it is a really important program for us and for the city. And so if there's any further conversations or information that the mayor or the city need, we need to provide it. But at this point, it's just, I need the board and the public to understand that if we could fund this, like, I would be coming to this board and asking us to fund this. We cannot, as far as I understand from lawyers, in terms of like the funding source. And so if there's anything we can do, and it's sort of an invitation as well to the mayor, city council, to continue dialoguing around this, like whatever we can do to try to save this program is going to be really important. So.
Can we, yeah, Julio wants to say something, I want to say something.
First I need to disclose that I have a niece who works for this program, so I'm probably not going to be voting on this, but as such, am I able to be included in any type of discussion?
I believe so. And just to be clear, we're not voting on anything.
We're not,
It's just a
I
discussion.
understand
Yeah.
that, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure that this is
Yeah.
out there.
Thanks for disclosing that.
Yes. So the money for the program was included in the budget that we received initially? So when did we find out this is a program that has been funded through the school system since its existence?
Through the city's contribution.
Through the city's contribution, but also through the schools. So what brought about the change that it was included, and then all of a sudden you go before the city council and it's out of the budget? that is one question.
Yeah, we were equally surprised to learn last month that there was information that they were requesting of the Adult Learning Center. And as you know, in our tenure together as this board and my role here, that's never happened before, and we've had 3 administrations with this one. And so we provided that information, and then we got confirmation last week that they had in fact not funded it through our budget. So we were like, oh, okay, this is
From the state?
from the city.
From the city.
From the city. $1.3 million from the city side.
Or that the city had not included.
Correct.
But when the city is responsible for a percentage of the school budget that they need to include. And do they, does the city break down where that money is allocated to? Or is it just the city needs to allocate 20%, let's say, I can't remember the numbers at this point, but let's say the city has to provide 20% of the total school budget, which includes the Adult Learning Center. Is that allocated a certain way, or is it just a chunk of money that is allocated towards education?
Sure, net school spending is specific to their portion that needs to be given to us, and in addition, the $1.3 million is specific to the programming. But I can have Maciel maybe, break that down a little bit for us. But it is in addition to the other contributions. Most of the contribution that the city has is for transportation.
Mm-hmm. Right, but having been a member of the budget committee of the city, that was never really broken down as to how it was provided to the schools, and I don't see why it would be now.
Your question, are you requesting more information in regards to the match that has to happen from the city?
Well, if there is a breakdown, like if the city says, well, our $30 million can only be used this way, which I don't think it is allocated that way.
No, so usually the way it's done is they just allocate, we usually always request the 1.3, they usually allocate around 1.25 for the program, and that just goes through the same budget process that we complete. So with our schools. So ALC meets with us just as any one of our other schools would. They have goals. They put their budget in my budget file the same way, and that's all that happens in terms of budgeting and planning for those funds. The city does not put any requirements attached.
And this is why I'm bringing up this issue, that if the city doesn't have a breakdown of how the money is going to be used, and the Adult Learning Center, we all understand that it's a necessary tool in the city, that then the school should be considered, the school system should be considering that as part of the educational. And I understand about Chapter 70, but I'm just saying, if we're having discussions here about parents needing support, what is the message we're trying to send these parents now? Oh, you need the support, but the school can't give you the support, when we understand that it is very much necessary for these parents and a lot of these adults to be able to support their children in the educational system. So I just wanted to make that, because I know I'm not able to vote on this, and we're not voting, but I just wanted to bring this out.
I just want a point of clarification. So though, Cynthia, what you're saying though is that there's a chunk of money that comes to the LPS budget that's their required contribution, and that doesn't have any breakdown, as Julia was referring to. Like it doesn't, they don't usually, it's not that the city gives us that money and says it has to be spent on this and this.
There is a breakdown, so that's the net school spending portion that we can share that with you, the very specific of that breakdown.
Okay, but is the ALC money part of that, or the ALC money is normally an additional contribution that the city makes beyond their net school spending requirement?
Correct. So if I could bring up the slide, it's usually one of the slides in our presentation when we do our budget presentations, and you have the breakdown between Chapter 70, what's required from the city, and once we flow through all the qualified expenses that they can deduct from that, we usually hit the bottom line necessary to hit net school spending, and then from there is where you see added back transportation, leases that are required to be covered by the city after 3 years, and the amount for ALC.
Okay, so the LPS has no say over whether the city makes that additional contribution or not, right?
That is correct.
That's up to them. So I think I would just echo what Ventura said in encouraging all of us to advocate for that incredibly important contribution by the city. I know that this city administration has highlighted ESOL and investment in ESOL as a really critical importance to our community, which I think we all agree with. And the Adult Learning Center is the single largest provider of ESOL classes and other important services in the city, and has been participating in other efforts to help diversify and upskill the LPS workforce, which is something else I think we all are in full support of. So I think it's really important that the city understand how important this contribution is, how it leverages the state funding that comes in to support this program, and how this program is not going to exist or have the same effectiveness without that. And so I guess one of my questions is, we had a great informational packet that was shared with us in our packet about ALC. I'm assuming that's been shared with the mayor and the city council, so they understand the return on investment, the outcomes, you know, the composition of the staff of the Adult Learning Center, all of those, they have that information.
They do have that information.
Okay, so it's really a question of advocacy at this point.
Okay, Noemi?
So my question is, what was the specific reason for cutting the budget? So that's number one, because I would imagine that would be a series of questions, and were those questions answered in a way that, you know, would merit us to give the money back?
Sure. So initially, the request was to get information, the data that you all have in your materials. And then they said they would have additional questions, including like details of salaries and stipends. That was also given to them. But there was no specific reason as to why it was removed. They said they were just going to think about it. We're like, okay. So it's unclear to us.
So I'm like Julia, I might abstain from voting because I'm on the ESL task force. So we meet as a group, and because we all have DESI funding, because you're correct, we cannot use funding that is allocated for elementary and secondary education for adult learners.
Correct.
So it has to be separate. And it is, my understanding, and it happens to many of us who are providers of adult education. So we get a separate funding line from DESI that is specifically for adults, plus we have other grants and other funding, which is the same thing that happened with the Adult Learning Center. And as part of that, we have to report specific reporting on the success rate of the students. And one of the last conversations that we had at the ESL task force, where we were all together, there were questions about what was success and what we were reporting. And this is something that DESI also asked us to do, like show us our success rate. And I think that those are the conversations that we need to bring back to the table, because even among us, what we're talking about, like what a group considered success rate was completely different from what the Adult Learning Center was considering success rate, and even the waiting list. There was some confusion about like what was the Adult Learning Center considering a waiting list versus Northern Essex versus some of the other groups. So I will abstain from that because I am on the ESL task force, and on my side, one of the things that we have been doing, because I believe in the work that the Adult Learning Center does, but I think we need to go back as a group to showcase the success rate in a way that people can actually see what we mean by success rate. So,
Maria?
So, just to be clear, I mean, I believe that this is a much-needed service in our community, but just to be clear in what we should be supporting, because my understanding is that any other organization can run the Adult Learning Center. It does not have to be run by the Lawrence Public Schools system. And if we're going to advocate that, I think we should include why this should be run by the, what is the benefits of the Lawrence Public School system running this organization. I am not sure if the intention is to eliminate the program or to just have the program be run by some other organization.
And I don't know, to me, it's unclear personally,
Correct.
but I don't know if Superintendent, you have.
Same, we're not clear about that.
Can I add something? When you have a child that is expelled, a child who is now an adult, considered an adult, and is expelled from an institution and is unable to finish his or her studies because of a situation that might have happened, that child is able to go through the Adult Learning Center and get his GED and complete his education. And that is why probably it needs to be run by the Lawrence Public Schools. That is my understanding. I mean, in some instances, I'm not saying that that's the only case, but just to give you an example.
I mean, I did also watch the city council meeting after it occurred on Monday, and I think the head of school, or the principal, they talked to the certification of teachers and the level of certification the teachers have in the current program.
The principal of the Adult Learning Center is here if you want him to address that question.
Yeah, I think tonight we just wanted to make sure that you guys had the opportunity to know what's happening. And I think just to your point, advocacy is what we would be looking from you all to the city council and to the administration. And so we absolutely want to continue to run it for the reasons that Maria has stated and many other good reasons that you all know. And yeah.
Thank you. Pat, I did see your hand, and then we're going to move on.
Where did Marcel go? Oh, this. I'm looking at the ALC funding sources for FY22. Those grants that are listed, who manages those grants?
So it's in partnership between the Adult Learning Center and our grants department.
All right, if the school department is not running the ALC, does the state take these grants back and reissue them to another group that would run the ALC?
That is unclear to us at this moment.
Okay.
The way we understand it at this point is that if at least they don't match what was funded in the prior year, all the funding goes.
Yes,
Because of the way that match works with it, they either fund 1.3, which is our request, or the 1.25, which was the prior year, or there is no funding at all. So it really just depends on what the city decides in terms of its funding. And then I'm not sure if they can change who receives the grant funding in terms of whether it's LPS or a different organization. That I don't
So,
know.
Maciel, I do have a question related to that, because we also have we have several DESI grants to run in our Adult Learning Center, and it is true that you need to have a matching. And if you don't have that matching, and the amount of matching is negotiated, it's not like, it's not a one-to-one. But if you don't have that matching, you may lose your funding entirely.
Correct.
So a question and an argument is, the first question is, how much was put into the matching for the different programs? And if the matching is the 1.3 million, then, because this is as part of the transparency piece, and it goes with everything that we have been doing through all this process. If that matching goes away, they will lose the money, like there's no question about it.
That is
So,
correct.
but I don't think probably the city understand that. And again, those are the pieces that we need to go to the table, we need to explain to people the funding, the expectation, and then figure out and negotiate with them, like, what are your concerns, and then figure out with them how we can address some of those issues, and at the same time, them to understand the impact that this type of measure will have on the rest of the budget and the services that we provide to people in the city.
And that information has been conveyed to the city.
Yes, but I have a question for you related to that.
Sure.
In a place where people, like, we're all very busy, and even for me, like I was today, like, reading through the documents and trying to condense them, I wonder how much we need to distill this type of information, because sometimes we send them in our quest to be detail-oriented. We send 20-page document, and sometimes they just need one-pager. They just need to know, like, this is how much we have in matching, this is how much you're providing, and if we don't get X, this is how it's gonna be detrimental to us. And the same thing with the understanding of DESI for adult versus DESI for PK-12. So.
You're right. So we did have, this was a meeting when we shared this information, and the administration's financial team was present at the meeting. So they have, you know, pretty good fluid understanding of grants versus local funding. And yes, it was.
I'm sorry. Yeah, keep talking.
So I just wanted to be clear that this information was both given in a meeting where people could ask detailed questions, in addition to accompanying materials and documentation to support both regulations and grants, so full understanding of the different funding sources.
So they know that by cutting these, the Adult Learning Center will have zero funding from DESI. They know that.
We shared with them the same information we're giving you. Here's grant, here's local, here's what happens, here's where the match has to happen, otherwise these money goes away. They know that.
All right, I'm gonna move us forward. Pat, it was originally your, I think, you had the mic. Anything else you wanted to say, or are you good? Okay, all right. Before I ask for a vote to go into executive session, we do have minutes from several meetings that we need to vote on, and I believe we need to vote on them individually, so I will call for a motion for each one of them. Do I have a motion to approve the May 11th, 2022 board meeting minutes?
So move. For all of them?
I'm gonna do one at a time, just
Okay.
for the record, yeah.
Second.
All right, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay.
I'm just abstaining because I wasn't here.
Abstentions, okay. Just abstain on that one. May 11th executive session meeting minutes. Do I have a motion to approve those?
So moved. Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions?
Abstain.
One abstention. Thank you. Do I have a motion to approve the April 13th, 2022 board meeting minutes?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Abstain.
Okay. All those in favor? It's all good. We're getting there. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? One abstention, Julio. Okay. And then finally, do I have a motion to approve the March 9th, 2022 board minutes?
So move.
Have a second?
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Any abstention?
Aye.
Julio, okay. All right, so in a second, we are going to enter executive session for the reasons stated at the top of the meeting, and we will be adjourning from executive session, and although we're happy to come out and share news of the contracts, and apologies if I knew we would probably gone into executive session right away. So do I have a motion to enter into executive session?
So moved.
Have a second? Second. All those in favor say aye. All right, that's everyone. So thank you for everyone who came tonight, and we'll now be transitioning. We'll be staying in the room here. We'll be moving for executive session. Great. Thank you.